Kumlen and Ablat Gemara. We are in the fourth page of Sukah. That today's blot is Daf Mem Gimel. We're up to the bottom of the page of Beis and Beis. The Mishnah said that we do not bench lulav on Shabbos, except for the first day, or we don't do the arava on Shabbos unless it's the last day. So, why? Tiltul ba'almu. All it is muktzah, taking a lulav on Shabbos. So, what is the problem? Because you're holding wood, so it's muktzah. So why did the Chachamim feel that you shouldn't bench lulav on Shabbos? Rabba says, Rabba Gzeida, we are worried. Shema yitlena biyadi, you might take it in your hand. V'yelech eitzel baki, you'll go to an expert lumot to learn. And Rashi says, you're such an amaret, you're going to learn what bracha it is, or you learn how to shake it. Now, everyone learns Pshat the Gemara. Everyone. So if you ask somebody, so why can't you bench lulav on Shabbos? Because you might carry it. I mean, that's what Gemara says. So the Baba Rebbe pointed out to Rabbi Zevin, the author of the Encyclopedia Talmudis, that's not pshat at all. And after the Rebbe said that, and you learn the Gemara, you can see clearly how right the Rebbe was, and just nobody spotted it. The real reason why you cannot bench lulav on Shabbos is because it's muktzah, not because you can't carry and you were scared to carry. It's because it's muktzah. But why muktzah should have played such a prominent role that prevented doing a mitzvah of the Torah is because you might carry, so that therefore the Chacham is, you know what, we're going to leave the muktzah in place. And you're not going to take the lulav because it's muktzah. At the end of the day, it's muktzah. If you look, the vendor pointed out, you look closely at the Rambam's words, it's clearly that way. At the end, Rabbi Zevin conceded. And then when you see the Rebbe's way of learning, and then you learn the Gemara, and especially all the Tosfos, and you see clearly, because everyone doesn't understand Tosfos. And then if you learn the Rebbe's Pshat, suddenly everything makes sense. I'll give you an example later. But that's how the Rebbe learns. If we're scared you might end up carrying it, going to an expert. You'll carry it 4 amos in the Shusarabim, and behind the time of the Shofar, behind time of Megillah. Same reason you don't blow Shofar on Rosh Hashanah, and you don't read Megillah on Shabbos. Rashi Tosfos, all the Meforshim ask over here, you have the lulav in the house. If you're going to take the lulav outside the house, the malacha that you're doing is actually taking it out from a private domain to a public domain. That's called haitzah. Carrying it for Rosh Hashanah is the next step. So why are we talking about havar? It's as if the Gemara is saying your lulav is in the middle of the street, and now you can pick it up and walk with it to a rabbi. It really should be the malach of haitzah. So Rashi comes along and says the reason why we say havar is talking about a case where you picked up the lulav, you had no intention of going to a rabbi. You thought you know how to shake it. You thought you knew the bracha. And suddenly it dawned upon you, you don't remember bracha from last year. So when you did the akira, remember carrying requires akira, lifting, transporting it, and then placing it. When you did the akira, you had no intention of carrying it out. So there's no hitzah. So Tosfos Rabbi jumps on Rashi and says, well, there's no hitzah, nor is there the aver of carrying 4 amos, because where's your akira? When you lifted it, you had no intention of carrying it out. So Tosfos therefore gives another answer altogether, and he says that the reason we're not worried if it's in your house that you can take it outside, because the fact that you have to walk through the door is going to remind you it's a different domain. We're worried that maybe it's already outside, and therefore you might carry it. There's no point, there's no posts, there's no markings there to remind you that you're carrying. And Rashi, therefore, according to Rashi, comes out a big chiddush that when you're carrying 4 amos in the street, we don't really care when you lifted it what your intention was, and because the main thing is you're carrying 4 amos. It's only when you're taking it outside of the house where your intention for that kira matters. And why that should be different is because the Gemara says in Shabbos, all the malachas learned from the Mishkan, bar 1, carrying 4 amos, the Gemara tried to find a precedent in the Mishkan. It didn't happen because the Mishkan was a private place. And the Gemara concludes it in that Tzadik Bov, halacha l'Moshe Sinai. So because it's halacha l'Moshe Sinai, therefore it's different than the Mishkan. Everything else has to be done with the right intentions, like the Mishkan, but not carrying 4 amos. Okay, says the Gemara, hachi. If so, if what you might carry in Shabbos, so how come you're allowed to, the first day Yom Tov will bench lulav on Shabbos? But why? Same concern. Says the Gemara, the first day we said you should do it at home. We said that everyone, because we said, remember after people were hurting each other and everything else, we told people that you should stay home. The end of this Mishnah, it says skinu. You should take the lulav at home. So therefore, that in itself will act as a reminder. You shouldn't take it outside. Says the Gemara.
Can you explain the link between the taking out the Rishus Harabim and making it muktzah? If you're allowed to take it at home, it's not muktzah. So where's the link that when the Rishus Harabim turns it into muktzah?
We'll see in a minute. Says the Gemara, "Hot Tainach." This makes sense. Achat takana, after they made a special takana. This is in the olden days when you're allowed to take it on Shabbos. Of course, it's not muktzah. So when we decided, you'll soon see that you can no longer take it on Shabbos, that it became muktzah. Says the Gemara. So we're learning over here now why you're not allowed to take a lulav the rest of the days of Sukkot, because it's muktzah, and then you might end up carrying it, and therefore we're supporting the muktzah. But the first day of Sukkot, in those days, they used to bench lulav. The question is why? So we said because the first day do it at home. So hot tainach, that all makes sense. Achat takana, that all makes sense after they've instituted that particular rule. You have to make it at home. Before they instituted the rule that you take it at home, then what was the logic? What's the difference in the first day and all the other days? They used to go to the base of Mikdash. So just like the first day you could bench lulav, so should the second, the third, the fourth day, they fall out on Shabbos. Eligamor explains. Rishon, the first day of Sukkot is so strong. The Isay min haTorah bigvul. Remember, around the rest of the world, only we have to take one day the lulav, but in the base of Mikdash, we're samachtem yeshivas yamin. There you have to do it for 7 days. So since the first day is prevalent everywhere, so that's why we decided the first day. You know what? Even on Shabbos, but the rest of the days, since the rest of Israel and the rest of the world, you don't bench lulav. So even in the base of Mikdash, we didn't want you to. So Risha, we didn't make Xera. Hanav, the lesson of Torah, all the rest of the days, we found my Torah is Gozu Rabban, and Rabban will go. So ask the Gemara, Hachiv, so Ha'id Nanami. So what about today? How come we don't mention lulav today, in the first day on Shabbos? Says Gemara, Nan loy yadinan b'keviyah deyacha. We're not such experts on the calendar, so we're not 100% sure that the first day of Sukkot is actually the first day of Sukkot. Says the Gemara, Inu. Now, what exactly means that we're not experts? I'll come back in a second. Inu, they, the Yodi Bikivu the Yarcha, but they who did know the calendar, Litchei. So those times, and they just saw after the Churban Beis Hamikdash, where they still knew the calendar. The calendar is only made by Hillel, who was the son of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, who was the grandson of the Rabbein Hakadosh. So it's 3 generations later of the Amoraim. So quite a few generations after the Beis Hamikdash. So how come we don't find that they mention Shabbos? Inachinami. Gemara says you're right. They did. We learned in one says the first day Yom Tov called Ha'amalichin as Loin Havais. In one mission it says, which we just learned in the beginning of this period, that everybody should bring the love into the Beis Hamikdash. That's one place. Either and to learn the last mission, the previous one of the last mission, the previous period we learned the Beis HaKnesset that we go to the shul. What they go to shul, go to Beis Hamikdash. Obviously, 2 different periods. Shema mina kan bizman she Beis Hamikdash kind. They went to the Beis Hamikdash. Kan bizman she ain't Beis Hamikdash kind. And here there's a time that the shuls were after the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. They used to go to the shul. So we see that you're right. They used to bench lulav on the first day of Sukkot, even post the Beis Hamikdash. It was only after we had to introduce a calendar and we were scared. We're learning more about it. They were scared that Shema Yachzad Dovla Kakula. They were scared that things will go bad again. That we don't know exactly when it is, so that's why we treat it as if it's Chutz La'aretz, it's 2 days, and also we do not bench lulav on Shabbos. We're not 100% certain Shabbos. Says the Gemara. Tais already says when it says that we don't know the calendar, doesn't mean we don't know the calendar, because actually we do. We have a calendar, and we know, but we treat it as if we don't know. And the Ritva explains very nicely when Hillel made the calendar, even though you're not supposed to make the calendar, you're supposed to make each month at its right times. Yet Hillel sat there with his bezin, and they went all the generations till Mashiach comes, and they said when Rosh Chodesh will be in, and they declared it as Chodesh or Makadosh Chodesh. Otherwise, how would it be Rosh Chodesh? And how would Yom Tov be Yom Tov? You needed bezin to make it to sanctify it. So they did all that, but they said clearly we're doing it on the condition that we continue in the Golus, and we continue to soul exactly the way it was in the times when we had Riyah. In Eretz they kept 1 day, so even now you'll keep 1 day. In Chutz La'aretz they kept 2 days, so even now you will keep 2 days. That was a condition. So it doesn't matter that we have a calendar and everything else. When he made the calendar, which everything that we're doing today is based on not just his calculations, they were actually makdashit. They made it holy, and it's because he made the calendar. Therefore, we have to follow all his rules. Interesting, the Rambam, the way he learns in the Zera Mitzvahs and the way the Ramban understands everybody else, the Rambam holds when all the Eden gather together every Rosh Chodesh, and we say Shabbos Avarchim, and we announce the Moiled, and we all say we declare Shabbos Avarchim, we are actually sort of being makdish and sanctifying the chodesh for this month. Because if Klal Yisrael gets together and does something together, it's as if we recreated the smicha. It's as if we have just makdish it. So it's not Hillel just gave us the calculations, and we will makdish it, and we still continue in the older way because that's what Hillel wanted from us. Saying about it further. So what it says, how do you know that that you have to bench lulav the first day outside of the base of Mikdash? The Tanya we learned, we learned before. You should take you should take by saying lekachtem. Every single individual should take lachem to yourselves. Mishalachem. It has to be your own. The hoitis a show was a guzzle that you shouldn't take a borrowed one, shouldn't install one. The yom by day. By day, and the Braisa seems to say even Shabbos. We're going to ask, why do we need a pasuk to tell you even Shabbos? Muktzah, who cares? Or if it's Gzeri, you might carry, who cares? Rishon, the Gemara says by Yom Harishon. Rishon, the word itself means I feel the rule. There's no limit to everybody, wherever you are. And what's Harishon? The hay is coming to limit. That when, regardless of when the first day is. It's the first day that we always bring it on Shabbos, but that's it. Hardishon, only the first day that we bring it that b'yom efil b'Shabbos. So more than I analyze, let me ask you, b'yom efil b'Shabbos is mechti. Tiltul ba'almu, it's only mukta itzrach krol and mishrei tiltul. Look at the Gemara's words right here. And the unfortunately, hard to understanding. What tiltul? We just tiltul ba'almu come here. The reason why we don't mention a little bit because gzeida shemi avirenu. The Gemara should have said mechti gzeida shemi avirenu itzrach krol and mishrei gzeida. That's what Moshe said. Where does muktzah come in? We dismiss muktzah right out of hand. No, because it isn't. It is also because of muktzah. That's the bottom line. It's tiltul. So Moshe said tiltul. Why would the Torah have to remember? It was Ezra. They all came along with all the laws of muktzah. So why would the Torah have to commit lulav? This goes according. This brayso follows the opinion of Rabbi Elazar. We had in Rabbi Miller that you're allowed to the needs of a mitzvah actually push away Shabbos. You're allowed to cut down a lulav and a hadas and a rav and an esrog on Shabbos in order to have it. And he uses that to tell you b'yom even b'Shabbos. This follows the view. The time you learn lulav, the whole machshirav deichin es Shabbos. Rabbi Elazar, you're allowed to cut everything down that you need for lulav on Shabbos. My time at Rabbi Elazar, how Rabbi Elazar knows such a novelty? Macron and Fasik Bayim said Lakatlacham b'yom rishon. Afilu b'Shabbos. Even on Shabbos, do whatever you have to do to make sure you have your 4 minimum. But Rabbanon, so what did Rabbanon do with the word b'yom? Because obviously they don't learn that you're allowed to cut anything down on Shabbos. So what do they do b'yom? High b'yom after what do they do with it? They need it for b'yom v'lei b'layla. That's lulav. Mitzvah lulav is only during the day and not at night. But Rabbi Elazar b'yom v'lei b'layla b'nolei. How does he know that mitzvah lulav is only by day? Nafkele, he learns it out. Mesefer dikra. He learns it out from the very end of the pasuk. It says, "Usmachtem lifnei Hashem lekechem shivas yamim." You should rejoice in the base of Mikdash 7 days. So we say yamim v'lei leilos. Then we learn that day and that night. No, but Rabbanon, why don't they learn from there? So b'yom is superfluous. For lekachtem lechem b'yom rishon, it seems according to Rabbanon superfluous because if you tell me day and not night, you can learn from the end of the pasuk. But about imahasam, if we would only say 7 days, you should rejoice. How I mean, leilif yamim masukah. I would have thought, if the Torah wouldn't have given us the extra b'yom, I would have thought, just because it says yamim, so what? By Sukkah it says, Sukkah Teisha Shivas yamim, and we know that by Sukkah, you sit there by day and by night. So maybe over here also, by day and by night. I never thought, Leilif yamim Sukkah, let's learn from Sukkah, Malahalan yamim, just like over there, it's by day. Vafil leis, even night. Avkanami here too also, yamim, vafil leis by day, and even by night. So that's what we would have thought. Therefore, it says an extra word b'yom to tell you, no, lulav is only by day. Says the Gemara, no, but the same question applies to Sukkah. The Torah says by Sukkah you should say 7 days. How do we know there's a mitzvah to sit in the Sukkah by night? Maybe only by day. The Sukkah, Gufim and Allah, and Sukkah itself, how do you know? The Torah learned, but Sukkah stage she was yamim. The Sukkah you should say 7 days. Yamim, the Brisa says yamim afil leilos. Days means entire days, including nights. Ato aim the yamim afil leilos. You say including nights. Ain alef yamim b'lei leilos. Maybe means by Sukkah also only during the day. But Dino, and it actually makes sense. Nemer kan yamim. It says yamim by Sukkah and nemer balul. I mean, everyone agrees that by lulav, days means days literally and not night. So why don't we compare Sukkah to lulav and say that just like lulav is only by day, Sukkah too. Malahalan yamim v'lei leilos, day but not night. Afkan yamim v'lei leilos, same thing here, day only. Oy klach l'derazut. No, we have another option. We have the Shivas Yimei Meluim, the 7 days of Meluim, which is also 7 days. And over there, the Kohanim had to reside in the base of Mikdash or in the Mishkan, and they couldn't leave. Nema kan yomim, nema b'meluyim. By the meluyim it says yomim, it says days. And malahal and yomim afil leilas. They were not allowed to leave by day nor by night. Is a afkan yomim afil leilas. So Sukah also it says yomim, maybe it means day and including nights. Says the Gemara. So which way do you go? Let me so who should we compare to? Should we compare Sukkah to Lulav or should we compare Sukkah to Shivim Eluyim? So we'll say Dover Shemitzvase Kolayim Medover Shemitzvase Kolayim. You know what? We're going to learn from Eluyim. Why? Because it resembles Sukkah. Sukkah is constantly, even if you argue it's only by day, but when by day? What time of the day? Constantly, every time you want to eat, every time you want to do some activity, you have to do it in the Sukkah. Lulav, on the other hand, is you pick it up, you're ready to get to the mitzvah, finished. There's actually an argument if every second that you're holding a lulav, you're doing another mitzvah or not. But definitely the chiyuv is only the first instant and that's it. So therefore, but in Meluyim also, you have to reside all the time at the Mishkan. So therefore, the Sukkah resembles more Meluyim, living there constantly, than lulav. Do not bring in something with mitzvah only for one moment, which is lulav. That's one way of looking at it. Perhaps I can argue the other way around. We should learn Sukkah from Lulav because they're both forever. But Meluyim was a one-off event. It was a one-off event, and because that was, because of the one-off event, maybe we cannot compare. We have a concept. You don't learn things with Doidus from Kachei Shah, something which is a one-off thing. So maybe that's a one-off thing, and you cannot draw any analogies to that. So what do we do? Therefore, we have Gzeda Shabbat. It says Teishu Gzeda Shabbat. Teishu. It says Basukas Teishu, and it says Teishu when it comes to Pesach Ramayah Teishu Yom Malaylo. It says over there by the Meluyim. So we have Gzeda Shabbat. Never can Teishu, never Meluyim Teishu. Malahal and Yomim days. Afleilas. Afkan Yomim Afil Leilas day, including nights. So therefore, the Chachamim say we need a bayim by lulav, an extra bayim, because it wouldn't be an extra bayim. I would have thought that we should say Shivas Yamim, where it says by lulav in the base of English, we should equate it to Sukkah, and that is day and night. That's why we need the pasuk bayim. Okay, says Gemara further. Let's talk about the Arava, Shiva, Arava, 7 days. Now, this Arava has nothing to do with Arava that's inside the lulav. This is a separate mitzvah. We had one opinion, Abba Shol, in the beginning of the third page, which says Arvei Nochal. The Arvei means the two mitzvah Arava. One mitzvah Arava, and the other opinion says Halacha Moshe Sinai. They're both learning it from HaTorah. That the Arava is one mitzvah that's inside the lulav. Another mitzvah Arava is to circle the mizbech, or there's two opinions, whether Netila, you're going to circle the mizbech holding an Arava in your hand and you bang it on the ground, or do you stand it up and put it against the mizbech? It's called zikif. Okay, so bear that in mind. We'll soon see the machlek. Talking about Arava, Shiva case, the Mishnah says that Arava sometimes is 7 days, even on Shabbos, if the 7th day coincides with Shabbos. And Gemara wonders why the 7th day. So Arava, Shiva, my time with Shabbos. First of all, why is it even Doicha Shabbos? Why is it Doicha Shabbos? Says the Gemara, L'chayda, why be worried that you might carry it like Lulav. And this is in a way even worse because you only have what do you call it? There's no mitzvah in the Torah anywhere outside of the base of English. There's Arava. So how come? So the Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan said, we wanted the world to know that it's, even though it's not written in the Torah anywhere, we accept that's Allah Moshe Sinai, or even Arvei Nochal, but it's not before in the Torah. So therefore, we decided that one day, if it falls on a Shabbos, we are going to be treated with such respect and reverence. We're going to still do this, so people will realize how important this mitzvah is, how significant this mitzvah is. So lulav. So why don't we also push off lulav? So since lulav is mahatorah, why don't we push off lulav every single day to tell the world that it's mahatorah? Because lulav also is not written clearly in the Torah. Because when it says in the pasuk, "We samachtem lifnei Hashem elokechem shivas yom hanos lulav." Maybe just be happy, dance all the time. So therefore, it's not a footage in the Torah. So to remind us that in the base of Mikdash for 7 consecutive days you have mitzvah lulav. Let's do it every single day, even whenever it falls on Shabbos. We should do it. So we answer lulav gzeida b'shum derabba. We're worried about because what Abba said. Because it might carry. So Arava nami nigzer. So why by Arava aren't we worried? So we answer. You know why we're not worried by Arava? Arava shluchei bezdin ma'isilah. But when it comes to Arava, the shluchei bezdin bring the Arava on Friday to the base of Mikdash. So how does that help us? So Rashi argues, but Rashi learns, and even though that it wasn't the shluchei bezin who took that rubber and circled the mizbeach. Who circled the mizbeach? Only kohanim, because when going around the mizbeach, that area between the mizbeach and the Beis Hamikdash, a Yisrael was not permitted to go there. It was only kohanim who were allowed to go there. So therefore, and kohanim, they as a reason they're careful, so we're not worried that they're going to end up carrying. So and lulav the chol maser, a lulav everyone does it, so we're scared that mishaps will happen. So how come Rava only the 7 days? Every single day. The shluchei bezin will bring it on Friday, and the kohen will circle his back. Why did you nominate only one day? So the Gemara, because if that Rava ends up being 7 days, that even on Shabbos, and lulav only the first day, what are people going to assume? They're going to automatically assume that the lulav is not as significant as a Rava. Rava is a more important mitzvah. So therefore, we didn't want that to happen either. We don't want people to treat lulav lightly. And so the Gemara says, the Yom Tov edition, fine. So why don't you make that Rava, if you're only going to choose one day, why don't you choose the same day that you use a lulav on Shabbos, also have that Rava on Shabbos? In fact, it makes sense. No, the people won't understand. People will think, they'll think lulav with the kadachi. They'll think that the reason why the first day Yom Tov we're doing this is because lulav is so significant, we're doing lulav. And you know what? Once we already do the lulav and we're not worried, you might carry, let's do that Rava as well. They won't realize that Rava is mahatayri. We had to make a statement, a public statement, and make them aware. So the Gemara knew, so why the 7th day? Any other day. Why choose the 7th day, the very last day of Yom Tov? Says the Gemara, we had to have a day that everybody's aware of. The moment you took it away from the first day, then it only makes sense to make it on the 7th day, because then it's a clear cut, everybody will remember, and it's much more significant. So how come today we don't push away as well? So we answer, why don't today also we do Shana Rabbah falls on Shabbos? So the Gemara, we are not experts in Kivur de Yarcha. But Inu, so the Gemara said, fine. But Inu, the Kivur de Yarcha, those people in those days when they didn't know the Kivur de Yarcha, when they still knew Behadri and everything else, so why didn't they do it on Shabbos? He also about Hedi, but Hedi came along. Amar, he said, Lo ikla. We made the calendar in a way that you're right. In theory, it should, but we made sure that the Shana Rabbah never falls out on Shabbos. This is what the Yerushalmi Paskins, and that's how Lachal Ma'asim the Gemara here sort of rejects it. We made sure it never happened, because if it would have happened, Taka would have been done a shyness on Shabbos. That's how important it is. What do you go? So the Gemara Teresa asked an interesting question. So if we'll make sure that Hoshana Rabbah never falls on Shabbos, why don't you make sure that Rosh Hashanah never falls on Shabbos either, so we don't miss out on Shofar? Why don't we make sure that the first day of Sukkot should never fall on a Shabbos, so that we shouldn't miss out on the mitzvah of Lulav, Mahat Torah? This way we miss out on the mitzvah of Mahat Torah. What's the difference? It doesn't even make sense, he says. So he says here, because at least by Rosh Hashanah and Lulav, we miss out the first day, we have the second day. So we're still, the mitzvah is not forgotten. By a Rava, if we don't do a Rava on Hoshana Rabbah, we don't do it at all. So that we miss it. And 2 years later, people totally forget such a mitzvah exists. So we're very concerned about the Darabah more than everything else. And then Tesa asks a very interesting question. Why is it that Lulav, we allow everyone to bench Lulav all over Israel on the first day, and Shofar on Rosh Hashanah, only in the Bezdins did they bench Shofar? We did not allow every shul to blow shofar, even in the olden days, on the first day of Shana on Shabbat. What's the difference between lulav and shofar? Why should one be better than the other one? So Tesis answers. Now listen to Tesis' answer, because it's very difficult to understand without the depth of shot. Answers Tesis. Because the level of muktzah by lulav is not as severe as the level of muktzah by shofar. Lulav is only tiltul ba'alma. You're just moving about. What's the big deal? Shofar, on the other hand, requires a skill. What's Tesis' answer? Who cares? What's the relevance of the levels of muktzah if the pshat in the Gemara is like everyone learns? You're scared, you might carry it. So if you're not scared, you'll carry the lulav. We shouldn't be scared. You'll carry the shofar. It's clear. And the Achrayim, you look at Achrayim, they have a very difficult time understanding traces, and they go up the wall. If you're clear, the Rebbe's pshat is that ultimately the iser of lulav is muktzah. The iser of shofar is muktzah. But why are we putting such focus on muktzah? Because we might carry, so therefore it supports that. Then takes the answer makes sense. The level of muktzah by lulav is less severe than the level of muktzah by shofar. So therefore by lulav they're more relaxed, allowed you the first day. And by shofar they didn't allow you the first day.
We said,
sorry,
but we said you can wet the lulav and put it in water and so on.
That's only in the times. That's only in the times when you could bench lulav on Shabbos. So then they just the moment you can do something, it's no longer muktzah.
Yeah.
It's and why? Because it became a keli. Now that in those days when they were able to bench on Shabbos, it's no longer muktzah. It's not removed from your mind. You have a mind to use it, and it has a purpose. So it becomes a keli. Today, when you're not allowed to use a lulav, it's no longer muktzah. But the muktzah level of moving something is less than the muktzah of a musical instrument, where it requires, and blowing it requires a skill, plus maybe you might fix it. So it's much more severe. Then Tez asks the other way around. So how come it says even after Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, in the bezdins they still blew shofar? In fact, the Rif, we'll talk about the Rif used to blow shofar in his bezdin on Shabbos, and lulav, once we stopped it everywhere, we banned it. So there's another hand, shofar is so important because shofar reminds Hashem that you should have the Akedah, so that he should have pity and compassion on us. We didn't want to eliminate it totally. We needed they should need some kind of a reminder. So therefore they allowed it in the bezdins. Okay, let's continue. Says okay, let's get to the Gemara. It says the Gemara, Ravin came with Chol, and his whole entourage came with him. Amri, they said, Ikla. No, they said Hoshana Rabbah did come out on Shabbos. But like Dachi, and it did not push away Shabbos. And it's interesting, they're arguing in the fact, did Hoshana Rabbah ever come out on Shabbos or did not? Anyway, they said it definitely came out on Shabbos, and we did not use the Hashanas. So why Taka didn't use the Hashanas? If you're telling me, and sorry, we didn't push away. So we question. So what's the problem? So why Taka don't you do it on Shabbos? We just said before that you can't. So why not? Who told you that Arava was regarding taking it? Dilma Beskifa. All they did was that they put it against the Mizbech. All they did was, you know why we don't do a shyness today on Shabbos? Because what they did then was if they would have taken the Aravas, then we maybe would have, after the base was destroyed, they still would have taken the Aravas on Shabbos. But you know why they didn't take the Aravas? Because even in the base of Mikdash, they didn't walk around with it. They just placed it vertically against the Mizbech. And today we don't have a Mizbech. So what activity should we do? There's nothing to do. Abai asked his teacher a question. You're telling me that the whole mitzvah Arava is just to place the Aravas, skifa, around the Mizbeach. So let me ask you a question. That's a question. It says in the Braisa, Lulav, Arava, says in our Mishnah, Lulav and Arava, Shisha, she was sometimes 6 or 7 days. My love, since we're comparing Arava to Lulav, isn't it the same activity that you circle the Mizbech, just like a Lulav you circle, the Arava you circle? So how come when Shoshana Rabbah falls on Shabbos, don't we circle the Mizbech as well? Ma Lulav b'Natila, Lulav is by taking it. Af Arava b'Natila, Arava also requires taking it. So the Chayt of Arava requires taking it. So why don't we do it on Shabbos? At least in the times when they were Baki b'Kvidiyach. Says the Gemara, so Rabbi Yosef said back to Abaye, just because they're both written in the same Mishnah means it's the same activity. Midi Idia is to say anyway that the exact same activity. How can each one had different activity? The Lulav had one activity and the Harabi had another activity. Harabi was just placing against the Mizbech, and therefore today we don't do it on Shabbat because there's nothing to do. We don't have a Mizbech. So how are we going to replicate that activity? The question says, by giving Pamachas every day the circle Mizbech. We'll see later in the Mishnah, every day the circle Mizbech once. But on that day, on Hoshana Rabbah, they went 7 times. So it seems clear they circled my lab, but Arava. They circled with what? We're talking about Hoshana Rabbah, aren't we? Talking about Hoshana Rabbah. That's so special on Hoshana Rabbah. So we see that they walked around, they circled with their feet around the Mizbech. So therefore we can do the same thing today. So the baselines are back. Loy, but Lulav, that's talking about the Lulav. They would circle the Mizbech, but the Arava, they just put it against the Mizbech. So Rabbi asked Rabbi Yosef, but Rabbi Nachman said, in the name of Rabbi Rabu, Arava, they actually circled the Mizbech, they walked with Arava as well. I'm like, who am Rabbi? So Rabbi says, I'm deterred by what Rabbi Nachman said. They say he was an Arava, but no, I mean, I'm telling you, he was only a Lulav. The Arava, they never walked around, and that's why even if Hoshana Rabbah falls on a Shabbos, there's nothing that we can do today to replicate that activity. We don't have a Mizbeach. And then Itmar Rabbi Lazar says they walked around with a Lulav. Rabbi Shmuel bar Nosson, Rabbi Chanina, bar Rabba, Rabbi Nachman, Rabbi Arava. Rabbi says disagree. Amalei Rav Rabbi Chabrei Rabbi Rabbi Chana. Rav said to Rabbi Yitzchak, the son of Rabbi Bar Chana, Bar Uri, you intelligent, you're someone. Tov Eimlach Milsa Ma'al. Let me tell you a beautiful thing. When your father used to say that Hadat this we learned in the Mishnah later on. Kol Hayom Makifin Esem Mizbech. Every day they circle Mizbech once. Pamachas once. Va'Yisa Yom Shana Rabba Makifin Esem Mizbech. Shapam they circled 7 times. Hachi Amar Avuch Mashmei Rabbi Lazar. This is what your father said. Name Rabbi Lazar. The lulav, they circle it with a lulav, but not with the arava. The arava, they just put leaning against the mizbech. Says the Gemara. We'll learn more about that in the next few days. Says the Gemara. Eichel has a question. It says lulav doiches a Shabbos b'tchilas lulav pushes away Shabbos the first day Sukkot. We will bench lulav on Shabbos in the olden days. The arava pushes away Shabbos b'seifei at the end. In the Pamachas, once Chol Shvi Shel Arava, so the story that happened once the Hoshana Rabbah fell out on Shabbos, and the Heviye Malbi Shel Arava, they brought many plants of Aravas Me'ed of Shabbos, so they prepared themselves. On Friday, they brought these Aravas to the base of Mikdash. They placed them in the courtyard of the base of Mikdash in order to use them on Shabbos, Hoshana Rabbah. The Hikilu Behen Baisusim, the Baisusim recognizes. And these are like this, Rashi said they're like this dukim, or the words dukim, and they don't believe in Arava because it's not written anywhere in the Torah. So what they did was, knowing that we, this is how Rashi learns, places learns a little bit different, but knowing that we don't do anything, it's muktzah, we don't move it. The kavshim tachas avanim, they hid. The Susim walked in. I won't give a whole talk that in Shas we have sometimes by Susim arguing with the Gemara, sometimes Tzedukim. And even though we put them together, they're actually not the same. By Susim are much more, they also translate the Torah, but they translate it in a different way. While Tzedukim take the Torah literally. So it's not really the same thing. The By Susim also have interpretations, but their own interpretations. Anyway, so what they did was they took the Aravas, and they hid them under rocks. And it'll be muktzah now. You can't dislodge the rocks on Shabbos, so they'll be stuck. The following day, so that's others say they just others say they just hid them, not because of muktzah. The following day, because they say maybe it's not really muktzah. He kiru ben amiaretz, the Amaratzim recognized that the Arabas were under the rocks. They didn't know the laws about muktzah, they were Amaratzim. They pulled it out of the stones, the Heviyim, and they brought them in. The Kohanim brought them in, and they stood them upright against the Mizbech. So here we see from this brayso, how do they do it? They stood them up. By Susim moidim, because by Susim don't agree, that banging the Arava pushes away Shabbos. Alma benatili, clearly from here you see that they actually says clearly, what does it conclude? That the Baisusim didn't agree of the banging of the Arava. So what do we see with Arava? You put it against his bed, but then they would take it and they would actually put it in the hand and they would bang it on the ground. So it's clear from here that is Natila, not putting against his bed. To you to the question, so clearly we see here that the Arava is also Natila. So therefore, we'll go back to where we started in the first place. If it pushed off Shabbos, why didn't it push off Shabbos after the base of Mikdash was destroyed? Interesting, Rashi says here that the Amaratzim, even though the Amaratzim, Rashi says they were not Baki Be'isr, Tiltul, and moving it, but they sided with the Perushim. The Gemara makes some disparaging remarks about Amaratzim, that you cannot trust them, you cannot trust them, and so on, they might be lying, and many other things. And yet the Amaratzim sided with the Perushim against its Dukim by Susim. This is more like the Baal Shem Tov's, Pashta Yid, who accepts everything. They don't necessarily understand. They don't know much intellectually or knowledge-based, but nevertheless, they had that Amun of Pshutim. The Rashi says that the Amaratzim all sided with the Perushim, with the Rabbanim. It's interesting. Okay, so getting back, Ela Nidchu. So I ask a question. So if so, then Hoshana Rabbah does push away Shabbos even after the base of Mikdash because it pushes away. Is it key? So one answer, why doesn't it? So one answer is because since we don't know which day of the Yom Tov it is, we're not Baki B'Kriyach in Chutz La'aretz, so also in Yisrael, they did not use it to a lot. Why? We didn't want to have different kinds of groups keeping different mitzvahs. If we don't do a shyness and they do, it's very odd. So the Gemara says, so I ask a question. You're telling me we're trying to line everybody else. So how come the first day Yom Tov? Before you said the first day Yom Tov, in Yisrael, they all benched Lulav because they knew the Kvida Yarcha, but we in Chutz La'aretz, we did not know. When the Chodesh was, we did not bench Lulav the first day on Shabbos. No, you see, you have different groups. Well, Yom Tov Rishon do lidon ladochi do dochi. We don't do it on Shabbat. They did. So Gemara now changes his whole mind. Amar says Gemara lididu nami ladochi. You're right. Nowhere in the world, once the base of Mikdash was destroyed, did they bench lulav on the first day Sukkot. Regardless of whether you're in Israel or Chutz La'aretz, because we wanted everyone. We don't want agudas. We don't want different groups. Everyone did the same thing. So what about the two mishnahs that contradicted each other? One mishnah said the base of Mikdash, and one mishnah said that they brought it to shul. And the way you explained it is with two different stages and two different phases. This is during the times of the base of Mikdash, and this is post. And it seems in the mishnah in the previous period that after the base of Mikdash was destroyed, they still brought it on Shabbos. They brought it on Fridays to the shuls. So even after the base of Mikdash, they still did it in Israel the first day Yom Tov. What are you telling me they didn't do it? The two mishnahs. In one place it says they brought it to the base of Mikdash, and V'tanya, the other place it said they brought it to the base of Knesset, the shul. And you answered, "Kan bezman base of Mikdash kaim." The mishnah in this page is talking about during the base of Mikdash, and kan bezman ain't base of Mikdash kaim. The previous mishnah is talking about after the base of Mikdash, but they still knew the calendar. They knew the Kriyach, knew exactly when the Shechedi should be, and therefore they still brought it on the first day on Shabbos. So you're right. Loy. Change your mind. After the base of Mikdash was destroyed because of Chutz La'aretz, they didn't put it on first day. We didn't want this in Etzisrael to do it on the first day either. No one benches lulav on Shabbos. But so how do we understand the two missions? Well, like Kasha, Kan b'Mikdash, Kan b'Gvul. In the base of Mikdash, they all came to the base of Mikdash and benched there, and the Gvul, the rest of them went to shul. They didn't go to the base of Mikdash. Either much further in Yerushalayim, but they couldn't go. They had an exemption. They didn't have to be early regel, and therefore that's what it means.